Um, of course, as per usual, things things always seem to go a little wrong. I'm trying to get Storybook set up and running, but it doesn't seem to want to. Can't explain why. Try to restart, and it's just hanging on me. Um, always fun stuff. Always fun stuff. But we continue on. We continue on. We keep going forward, and that's how we do things. So yeah, today the talk is going to be. Let me get my chat open here. There we go. The talk is going to be about responsive design. So while I'm trying to get this all working, I'll go ahead and start with basic explanations of what is responsive design, what does it mean, possibly how is it used in different contexts, those kinds of things. Um, Basically, most people, when they say responsive design, are talking about CSS front end, um, having a website that on desktop, is much wider, fits into widths and things of that nature. Um, but when you go down to a mobile and it shrinks down much smaller, it usually flips and goes vertical. I don't know how you perceive that. Depends on how many times you've heard this, how many times you've seen this, how many times if you've ever done this. Um, but basically, the idea is it uses different browser-based technologies to to do this kind of stuff for you. Um, Mostly, they're referred to as media queries, especially in the browser, and that's a CSS. That's a CSS property. There's been a recent update to I guess you would say, the syntax of media queries. I actually have a little article that I'll go through here shortly that will showcase the old and the new. And I kind of like the new format, by the way. But while we're doing this here, I'm going to see if I can start working towards maybe getting something up for the display. I do have something for the display. Let's see here. Let's go to my GitHub account. And the last PR I put out there would have had a chromatic build. So let's go to my organizations. Go over here. There we go. All right. So yeah, let me get this up here, and then maybe we'll be able to move forward. There's that. View the details. There we go. I think this ought to have us. Hopefully, it'll have us logged in. There we are. No, I did not want to do that. Sorry here. I'm just trying to get us to something that we can. Here we go. Okay. I think we've got where we can potentially test this here, which is good. Oh, there's my date time stuff. That's what I was going to use, was that. And then we'll do that. Okay, good. So now we're back to here. Yeah, so, and giving some people some time to see the links, see everything go live. That's good. All right, so once again, media queries, responsive design, all that kind of stuff. Basically, like I said, the idea is you're trying to make your UI look different and more appealing, or at least more usable in different formats. Whereas the mobile format is much smaller because your phone is only about this big, so it's not as wide as your normal screen. So on your normal screen, you've got a lot more width than you do height in general. So you can lay things out in a more in an easier format, and easier, you can display more blocks of data, or whatever maybe end up getting displayed. And so a lot of times as that goes down, as that shrinks down to size, what you do is you take that data and you kind of flip it. So you end up flipping it vertical. Now, how do you do that? Well, with things like media queries, basically, when it detects that the screen size has now decreased, you basically then you change the styles within your particular item to fit a new screen size. For example, if you have, let's just say you have different sections of data being displayed and you're on a desktop application, well, you might have you might have the space to have 3 or 4 sections across, and kind of list them across, and maybe they go down further, maybe that's enough, whatever it is. But as this gets reduced down to and so each one of these, here's an example. So each one of these sections perhaps would take up about 25% of the space. So you could have a setting in there for, if you were being very, very specific, you could have a setting in there that would say 25% on each of those when it's the size of the screen is beyond a certain measurement. And we'll look at those here in just a minute. So, but as it gets smaller, you might increase that size to 100% and then make it take up all of the width. Uh, in HTML, in CSS, in all of those things, when you do that, what happens is, if you have your HTML aligned correctly, if you have, you know, a section, a container that is a certain height or whatever, usually it would be a full height of the entire page. Well, it's going to get shrunk down, and these other items will get shrunk down as well. So basically, as the screen gets smaller, your individual items in there get bigger, and they push. The way the browser technology works is, if two items cannot coexist side by side and take up the amount of space that they're supposed to take up, then one gets pushed down below. So automatically the browser does this for us. It automatically says, okay, well, these 4 here would not be able to fit on a screen this size, And so what we do is we say, well, when it's below a certain measurement, then we go ahead and we set our width of our items internally to a much higher percentage that would then make sure that they align properly and they align vertically instead of aligning the normal horizontal way. And that's what responsive design basically does. Now, that's not the only type of responsive design that there is out there. Now, there are, if you've ever worked in any kind of mobile platforms, I don't know as much about Android, but I'm willing to bet that if it's in iOS, it's probably in Android. I've done more in iOS. iOS has the same kind of thing. Basically, you can you can design your application to where it can respond to different types of devices. So you can have you usually you probably design most people probably design their iOS app for a phone, but you could also make it work much. It could also have much more appealing layout. You wouldn't want to necessarily keep the phone layout if it went to like a tablet, for example, especially if it was a tablet that was flipped. What would that be? If that was vertical, it'd be horizontal. When it's flipped, in landscape mode, basically. So if you have a tablet in landscape mode, you don't want to have the same, linear format to your layout. That would look silly. Why do that when you have all this available space? So even it can respond there. That's not CSS. That's specific. Now I don't know. Like I said, I've done some mobile, but not a whole lot. But even there, you can have your application respond to the type of device that is viewing your application. That way, you don't have to write a different application for each device, for each type of device. Even now, for each if you're outside of iOS, yes, of course, if you're writing specific to iOS, it's only going to work on iOS devices, but it can work across the entire spectrum. It can work, on a Mac. It can work on on an iPhone. It can work on an iPad, and even work on an Apple Watch if you want to somehow make one that's that small. Now, I don't know if that's true or not for Apple Watch since they're so small, but I'd be willing to bet you probably could. Um, let's go ahead. What we'll do now is we will move on to we're going to go back to CSS. So that's showing that responsive design isn't just about web technologies. It isn't just about HTML and CSS. But I will say, mostly when people talk about responsive design, they do mean that. They do mean CSS. They do mean HTML. Most people, if you say responsive design, that's to a developer, that's probably the first thing he's going to think of: HTML, CSS. All right. So what we will do now is I will pop over to a screen share, and I will share this article that I found a couple of days ago. By the way, this article I ran across on Daily Dev, which is one of the links on my pinned post. I've started my own. What do they call it over there? My own place. Right now, I'm not gonna show it. But let's see what we got here. All right, yeah. So we've got this. So the new CSS media query syntax. This is, I'd heard about this. I'd seen someone post about this a while back. And so finding this was a really good thing. I just happened to run across this on Daily Dev. And great place to find all kinds of articles, especially the kind of articles you want to look at. Now, this is the old format. So the old format was basically, I think you have min and max width is what you have in the old format. And so you would have to sort of say, okay, if you're within a min width of here, then this will happen. If not, then then you can kind of stair step your styles. Usually, what you have, sorry about that. Usually, what you have is you have mobile and pretty much the rest, because it's really truly rare. I've never once seen specific styles for mobile, then for tablet, then for desktop. Usually it's mobile, everything else, because even on tablet, unless you've, I guess if you do have your tablet in a certain direction, potentially you may want to have that similar layout to the phone. But more than likely, anything above mobile probably just has the basic styles. And so really you're designing it. And this is where the whole concept of mobile first comes in, and all that kind of stuff. Um, because you design for mobile first and then work your way out. Nowadays, at least that's the way a lot of people do things. Now that's not a lot of ways that every application does. Um, I have been given the okay by my full-time job, my full-time client, to talk about them and what we do there. Now, the company name, in case anyone's wondering, is Myosh, Myosh, and we do applications for documentation and creating. It's not just documentation, but basically we allow the user to create their own forms to contain their own data and be able to report on that data, because a lot of our clients, what they do is they are in a they're in an industry basically where they have to have a lot of government reporting. A lot of them are construction sites, things of that nature, things of that nature where there's a lot of security procedures that are involved. And so basically, we have to, our customers need to document what's going on. They need to document every person that comes on site. There's certain rules they have to follow. There's certain forms they have to fill out, and they have to be able to report on those forms to, government authorities to say, look, we did our job. So if something does happen on their site, if someone gets injured or something like that, at least they can come back and they can say, well, they signed off on this. They knew the procedures. They did what they were supposed to do. It's really sort of a check mechanism to make sure that they're covering themselves in the case of something happening, and and also to try and stop people from actually having anything happen, because it gives them the ability to know what they should be doing when they're on site. There's a lot of things that come along with that. One of the things we do in that is we do have a responsive design version of the site, where we're doing something somewhat similar to this. So this is the old version of the media query. So you would have the min width, like I said, you have max width. Usually min width would have the phone styles, and then everything else would actually be beyond that. Now this has changed to I feel at least this is a simpler version of the media query. So you've got, media width is greater than or equal to 500 pixels. So that does make, in my opinion, that does make a lot more sense, because min width, max width, it got really confusing. It got confusing what you were trying to say. At least for me, when I first started using it, And every time I came back to try and use it, that was the real thing. I would come back and try and use it, and I'd have to go, "How is this done again? You have to do this," and you try it, and you have to try a couple times, and you have to fail a couple times, and go, "Oh yeah, it actually works like this. Even though it's called this, it really works like this." This makes a lot more sense. So basically, this is more programming, like if you will, in the way they decided to go with media queries, which I like. So yeah, you've got, if the width is greater than 500 pixels, then these would be sizes above uh, items that are 500 pixels in width. So more than likely something that's not a phone, or maybe something that's a little bit bigger phone even. Um, and so here we go. Yeah, once again, here's the max width thing we were talking about. So the old way is max width is 800. The new way is max width is less than or equal to 800. That makes a lot more sense, because if you think about it, if you say max width 800, what I think when I first look at that is, I think, oh, well, I want to start at 800, but no, no, no. It's end at 800 there. So as you can see down here, it makes more sense. The width is less than or equal to 800. It ends at 800. So it goes up to 800, not beyond 800. That, to me, like I said, makes a lot more sense. And what's really nice now about this new syntax is you can do stuff like this. You can have items between widths. So you can have between widths thing. Now this right here was probably one of the things I thought was the coolest thing about what they did, and one of the nicest additions to media queries and to CSS in general, is to be able to do this, to be able to say between this width and this width. You would try to do that in some of your media queries. Some of the media queries would do that and would try to do that. It was a lot harder to make that work, by the way. That was really obnoxious to try to get to work correctly. That's pretty much all that was the article. But the idea is there. The idea is laid there. This is the idea behind what media queries do, what responsive design does. We're trying to design to different formats, to different display types. I'll stop sharing here. We can pop back over. I don't know that you need a tablet unless it was involved in a heavy keyboard. That's true, and that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying there. I'm saying that you probably wouldn't need a tablet design. You more than likely you need a phone design and everything else, and that's how I've usually done it on most of mine. Now, unfortunately, I couldn't run my code. Although let's see here, did I? Oh, I actually didn't bring up my code. I will bring up my code real quick, and while I'm doing that, but next I'm going to showcase actually how the code looks and how it works in a responsive design situation. Now, I just thought about this. I may need to put this in a new window. Yeah, let's move this tab to a new window. There we go. And the main reason for that is I do not want to have to minimize, because I'm going to put that tab into an actual mobile view here. So we'll show it in the regular view, and then we'll show it in the mobile view. Now I will give a warning on using the mobile view inside of something like Chrome. And this comes from once again, every advice I give comes from personal experience, things that I've experienced personally. When you're using the mobile view in Chrome, just know that it's visual only. It's visual only. The way it works in there may not necessarily be the way it works in an actual device. And so testing in mobile in Chrome's mobile view is not a substitution for testing on a real device. I learned this at my last job. We did a whole redesign. The application that we did was already 10 years old or something like that. So it predated what was the concept of mobile first. So there was no real mobile design with it. I went through and I created a whole mobile design, and I tested everything in Chrome's little mobile guy, and made it different sizes of different phones, and made sure it looked good and all that. And man, it looked great, and it responded great, and the little mouse would click, and I'd be able to drag and all that stuff and do those kinds of things. It looked great. And then we went to test on a device, and it went horrible. Nothing worked. I mean, nothing worked. All this time and all this work, and the QA testers go, "Brandon, it doesn't work. I mean, it doesn't work at all. Look, I click here and it's not working. This isn't working. That isn't working. It doesn't scroll right. It doesn't. Oh man, nothing works. So, like I said, Chrome's mobile view is great. It's good for testing. It's good for visual testing, but it does not substitute for on-device testing. If you want to test on a device, you want to actually test on a device, there is not to be confused with Grok. There is a tool out there called ngrok, not to be confused with X's Grok. It actually what it does is you can point it at a local point on your drive, and it will create a website for it with a really really long weird name. But if you pay for it, you can actually get a much nicer one. But basically, it will give you this really long URL. You take it, you paste it into your mobile device, and you can test on your mobile device. You can test what your site would actually look like on your device. And what's really nice is you can send that to other people and have them test on their mobile devices, and it'll all run off your machine. Great tool. It's the free version is a little limited, but it's still if you're just using it for basic testing. But honestly, I don't think it's that expensive to pay for a full version either. So it's worth it. It's definitely worth looking into if you need to do a lot of mobile device testing for a website. And that's the real way to test. Do not take Chrome's mobile version as the real version. So let's pop over here real quick. Let me see if I can get this to look a little bit better. Let me make sure it actually works. Of course it doesn't. Yeah, it doesn't work. Let's see here. Let's refresh. And here we go. Let's try. Of course not. Why would it work? Let me see. I might jump over here. And I might just end up doing this in... If I have to go to Firefox, if this works in Firefox and does not work in Chrome, then I am going to be amazed. Because the next thing I want to show is Bsoft Components date time component and how it responds differently to being in a desktop view to being in a mobile view. Chrome does have Firefox does have mobile testing as well. Honestly, I really don't know why Firefox doesn't get as much attention as it does. It does a really good job for the most part. Let's see if we can get back over to here. Maybe it's here. Okay, let's see if we've got it working. Sorry, it's taking time here again. No, I want to actually, I need to sign in first of all. Let's see here. Connect to GitHub. There we go. All right, pop over to here. Maybe we pop into here. Okay, let's try this again. Here's my date time. Let's just see if this works. If it does, we'll share it here and we'll be able to show it. I do want to show a little bit of the code, but the code really isn't all that impressive. And of course, it doesn't work here either. I literally tested this thing out this weekend, and now, of course, it's not working. So we'll go ahead and we'll share code at the very least. Let's get the code in at least a format that can be easily viewed. And then we'll share that. We might just have to talk about, there we go. The kind of things that happen. Like I said, I always say it, you never know what's going to happen on a live stream. And that's entirely true. Okay, here we are. So we'll come back to this. Now we will go ahead and do, a screen share. We'll do my coding window here, and we'll share this. Okay, so we are in the date time component. The part I'm talking about here is this is a little bit different in the way that mobile design and responsive design works, because I was speaking of responsive design, and that's why I wanted to showcase what I'm talking about here, because it's really interesting the way that we've done this here, the way I've done this. So once again, in the normal mobile view, you would just see a normal date time component. You click in it, the little drop down comes up with the calendar in it and allows you to select. I'm using this this library called Media Query. Actually, I created Media Query, but what I use behind the surface is, let's see if I can find what this is called. It's called React Hook Media Query, and it has a hook here called Use Media Query. And you can actually pass in different media queries. This is the old format. If you can't tell, this is what I was talking about when I was saying differences in old formats and new formats and all of these kinds of things. This is now these can be these. This is a component, an actual React component here. This is the default selection, meaning that it can be overridden. So this can be overridden when someone uses the component, but the default settings for mobile, tablet, and desktop are here. Basically, it's quite a simple component. It has, it basically has the different renders, the different component renders that you work at. So you define your queries here, you define the different markups here, and then depending upon what device setting you're in, it decides which content to show. So for my mobile markup here, we had this quite different. So this was the markup for the mobile markup of the component. Once again, this is why I wanted to show it, because it's really nice. What happens is, in the normal one, it ends up in a situation where it's normal. It displays, you click on it, it pops open, you make the selection. But in the mobile view, it's much smaller. So when you click inside of there, what ends up happening is, instead of it being smaller and squished in and still tries to look the same, what I did instead is I actually end up using what I call the mobile overlay panel, and the mobile overlay panel then docks to the bottom of the screen, much like you see in a lot of mobile websites. If you've ever noticed in a lot of mobile websites, what you'll do is you'll go down to a date time, or mobile apps or something like that, and you'll click on a date time, and it won't try to hook itself into the text box you clicked, but it'll try to attach itself usually to the bottom of the actual screen. So it pops up and it kind of becomes part of the bottom of the screen, and then you can do whatever you need to, and then you have a dismiss, and that's what I wanted to show, because there's a little apply button down there, and the apply button looks like it's part of the screen. It's actually really nice. It actually makes it look really nice. We use this at my full-time job at Myosh. We use this to do mobile compatible date times and things of that nature, so in the mobile device or in the mobile version of the site, when they click on a date time, they just get the little mobile overlay panel that comes down to the bottom of the screen. It still has the whole selection interface for the calendar, so everything else is still the same. Because if you see here, it goes to render selector. Render selector goes to my different selectors, the day selector, the month selector. Once again, this is why I wanted to actually be able to show the component, because it actually, Bob, it did work on my machine. I tested it about 15 minutes before I started this thing. It worked once, and then it stopped working. Yeah. It's the classic it worked fine on my machine. I don't know why. I don't know why. This is not the first time this has happened to me. I'll tell you a really quick story. I think it's a funny story. So we had a client showcase. I was working for a client. It was the first company I worked for here in Australia. I won't mention the client. I won't mention the company because I haven't gotten clearance to do so. But I was working for this company, and at the end of every sprint, as per usual, we would have a client showcase to show them the work that we had done and how far we had gotten. And I was always the one, since I was the lead of the team, I was always the one who did the showcase. I got everyone's work together, and I was the one, because it's a lot harder to pass to this person, whatever. So everyone just told me what they did. I went through the showcase. Anyways, I'm going through the showcase, and this was like the thing that really we were working on, which was it was some payment processing work, but it was very specific to certain types of payment processors, whatever. I had tested this thing 10, 15 times before the meeting. I'm not kidding. I went through, and I do that because I'm doing it in my head. I'm doing the presentation like I'm doing right here in my head, so that I'm getting ready, I'm preparing for what I'm about to say and all that kind of stuff. Anyways, um, I get there, and quite literally, I click the button, and it sits there and spins and spins and spins and spins, and it doesn't do anything. And I'm like, this just worked. This just worked. And I went, I promise you. I mean, these are clients, I promise you, this just worked. And one of the clients there starts laughing and just can't help herself, and just starts laughing and thinks it's so funny. I literally had to stop screen sharing, and then as soon as I stopped screen sharing, suddenly the thing went through, everything happened, and then I just re-screen shared and showed that it went through. But they're like, "But we actually want to see it go through, Brandon." It never did. Every time I would screen share, something about the screen share was blocking something about the actual part that I was trying to showcase. And that is not an uncommon thing, at least for me. That doesn't seem to be an uncommon thing. Things break. You watch 10, 15 minutes after this, I'll go through and I'll restart stuff again, and it'll all work again. It's just I actually stepped Bob James through this not long ago, this exact code, and it was working. So I know this code works because I stepped him through it. So I know this works. But for some reason, of course, the live stream with people watching and all of this kind of stuff, and it doesn't work. Anyways, let's get back to this. So yeah, basically, it still uses the same. Basically, the mobile view and the regular view still uses the same selectors, still uses all that kind of stuff. So with the Media Crew, we have the mobile markup and the above mobile markup, which is what I'm saying. Usually, when you have a design, excuse me, you have mobile design, everything else, because there really isn't much of a point. It's really rare that you need to have a tablet specific design, a small desktop specific design, and a large desktop specific design. I mean, that's usually where the breakpoints in these different frameworks are. They have those different, breakpoints here and here and here. I actually don't even use. I mean, most of my components in here are written in such a way that they sort of adapt to whatever environment they're put in. This is one of the few cases where I actually had to write something that was specific to mobile. I would show it because I use Tailwind in here, and Tailwind has its own mobile breakpoints as well. It has, I don't know if it's extra small. It might have extra small, small, medium, large. Could be an extra large in there. Um, One of the reasons, this is a little off topic, but one of the reasons I use Tailwind is because you can also go in and you can modify what your breakpoints are in the actual config file, which is basically this guy down here. So this is the Tailwind config file. So you can set up all kinds of different items in here, animations, and I mean, you can do all kinds of different things inside the Tailwind config file. And this is why I like to use Tailwind, by the way. It's very configurable, allows you to do things like theming. This is how my theming is done. The primary colors, gray colors. You can even do dark. I've got 3 different dark and light colors. And these can all be themed, by the way. These can all be themed. A there's a piece of code in the library here somewhere that actually, I don't want to go digging for it, but that actually allows the user of the component library to set these items. So they can either use the default ones, or if they want a different coloring scheme, they can use a different coloring scheme. If they want their dark and light colors to be slightly different than the defaults, they can use their own dark and light colors. The component library is completely configurable, allows you to do just about anything visually that you want to it. Every component has its own, has many different pieces that can be overridden. You'll notice these templates all over the place. Just about every part of the component has the ability to do a template. Oh my gosh, you know what? I think I just realized how I did not, why my thing wasn't working. There's that. I'll bet money on this. Hang on. I might be able to show this, guys. Let's give this a second. I just had a thought. So now let's try Storybook. I think the issue was I was running in something else and I might have had some other libraries installed and didn't rerun my install when I changed back to this. Let's cross our fingers and maybe we can get this working. Maybe not. It's still hanging where it was before. Okay, never mind. Yeah, it's still hanging where it was before. For the life of me, Storybook just sits there and hangs. It's not quite finished. So when I try to go over to Storybook here, it just, yep, it says that it can't fetch an imported dynamically imported module. Well, it can't fetch it because it's not started up fully yet. It's hung right in the middle of the process. Oh well. But yes, that's what the component library does. It's built around principles that will work easily, that where the component library will work easily in many different formats. Um, like I said, in this case, this is one of the rare components that probably needs to have a mobile specific format, and that's mainly because the display. I mean, technically, you could probably have the actual uh, calendar there just pop below. But the problem is, what if you happen to be right in the middle of the screen and then it pops, off the screen? It's just easier if you go ahead and click it and it actually, you can make sure it displays there. That's why I did it this way when I went to bring in mobile capabilities and things of that nature, was to go ahead and do this, bring in the mobile capabilities there. And now it looks nice. It's always going to display, it's always going to work. The user's never going to have a possibility they can be scrolled to a certain section. And now they can't see a part of the calendar. And then when they go to try to scroll, it goes away. Oh, it's just a nightmare. Obviously users complain then because then they say, well, it doesn't work correctly. Well, it does, but not really. So this is why I ended up doing something like this and ended up using something like this. Like I said, most of these other components are really quite basic components. They're checkbox groups, a toggle, um, group buttons. They're all things that fit very easily onto any format, onto any type of form, any type of display. So you don't really need to have mobile specific stuff there. I wish I could show it there. At least then I could showcase how some of the small, medium, and large things are done and all that kind of stuff. Because a lot of frameworks have that. Almost every good JavaScript framework out there has media queries built into the framework so that you can have specific styles that work in a specific way. I guess I could show one thing, even though it's not specific to media queries. There are things here in Tailwind that have specific things that will work a specific way, and this is kind of how it would work. Of course, if I can find it. Here, we will go ahead. Oh, we are screen sharing. Good. You see that? I forgot where we're screen sharing. Right. Okay. Here's what I'm talking about. So this is the type of stuff. So you've got BSC text black, dark, BSC text mono, light 1. This is the same type of stuff that would happen in a media query. For instead of dark, it would be SM or XS or something like that. But in this case, this is the dark mode. This is Tailwind's dark mode stuff. So basically, if you put a prefix on your item of dark, then what will happen is this is when dark mode is turned on, this will override anything else that's here. Well, in this case, they're both of these properties are text properties. So this is a text color property, and so is this. So when dark mode is when the user has dark mode turned on, basically then this will be displayed over any other text color. So since this is a text color property, it will overwrite any other text color property. So in this case, that's the case. That's how the media query stuff would work. You'd have different sizes, and depending upon where your device fell in, you would then have that would be the item that's applied. That would be the style that's applied, and it can be anything. Those styles can be just about anything because these prefixes can prefix any kind of. They aren't really specific to any type of property. So you can pretty much put any property you want, and if it's small, and you can make the color different if you wish to in a certain size. So that's the way these libraries work. Um, yeah, I'm a. Oh, yes, I see that you made it, Jason. Yeah, unfortunately, I really wish I could showcase this. That was really the whole point of this. The whole point of doing this was to showcase the library and how it responds to media queries. How when you're viewing in a mobile view, you end up having a different view. It looks different, responds different, and I really wanted to showcase the way that the library does because because it's different than most things. Most people have seen the responsive design. Most people have seen the websites where you view it like this, and then you go to the same website in your mobile, and it shifts it and it makes it look a little different, but it fits it onto a mobile. Most people have seen that. I'm not so sure how many people have seen completely different views based upon media query. I'm not sure what OT means, Bob. But unless that's out of time. But But yes, that's what I wanted to show. That's why I wanted to showcase this. I might go ahead and once I get it back to working, I'll probably stop the stream here, and I'd be willing to bet money that it will work. So I might go ahead and post the before and afters after this is all done. Overtime, yes, it did go into overtime. And so And so basically, yeah, I think that's pretty much it. Response time. Now, I've had some thoughts on the next ones. Um, Initially, I had talked about possibly having a master series. I'm kind of shifting um, priorities in the things that I'm doing. With that, I still want to do a lot of the master series talks. Those are the things I want to talk about and I want to continue to present on. But I think instead of doing them as a video that I post and all of this kind of stuff, I think I'm going to continue doing them as live streams. So what I'd like to do then, the first thing I was going to start on was going to be HTML. So that might be the next topic that I do then. It might be basics of HTML, going through the HTML5 elements, kind of talking about them, showcasing why, or talking about why you should use certain one element over another, how that helps you in the application that you create, what that does for you, those kind of things. And then maybe digging a little bit deeper into some of the more specific items that maybe could have a little bit more centering a div. That's more advanced. That's an advanced talk. Yeah, centering a div. My gosh, for something so simple, I've done it. I've done it a fair number of times. I've unfortunately I don't have a BSoft component doesn't have a modal yet, but my component library at work um, does have a modal where we have to center it. So I have written those many times. Maybe I can bring something in. That's kind of a mix though, isn't it? It's kind of more CSS almost. It's kind of doing all of these little properties and all that just to get things to center right. And oh my gosh, it absolutely it's amazing sometimes some of the things that can throw things off. And CSS has so many different intricacies of things. Good example. I am getting a little bit into overtime here, Bob, but just for example, if you have an absolutely positioned div, usually that is it's zero location is up at the top here, is like up here, top left of the screen. But if your div happens to be contained inside of another div that is relatively positioned, then if the div is actually located here when it display, but the div around it is like this, then its 0, 0 position is here, not here. So absolutely positioned divs can have some problems. Um, so you say, well, let's not use absolute positioning. Let's use fixed positioning. There's another one. Oh gosh, what is it? There's another CSS property that if your fixed position div is contained inside of a div with that property, and for right now, it's a transition property. I think it is. If your fixed div, if your div that is fixed positioned, which should, once again, 0, 0 should be aligned up here. But if it's contained inside of a div with a transition property, which a lot of times we use because we're trying to have this nice little display when things come up to be shown and come back to be shown, it will cause the exact same issue. I've seen it happen. I actually had to take out the transition property in one of my components so it would work correctly. I'm telling you, it's just one of those things, there's just so many little things like that. And, yes, I realize, and actually the whole absolute relative positioning thing actually is a really cool trick. If you know how to use it right, it's a really cool trick, and there's some really nice things you can do about it. In my components, what I do is I actually do recursion upward. Recursion in the DOM goes from point up. So basically you go all the way to body if you want to through parent element. It's a part in JavaScript called parent element. So if you're at element here and you say parent element, you can literally traverse up the DOM all the way back up to body. And that's what I do. So a lot of times when I was using absolute positioning in my overlay panel and things like that, I would actually check to see if there was a relatively positioned div up to the point where I wanted it to actually be. A lot of times what I'll do is I'll also check to see if there's scroll bars anywhere in that tree. That's how I hook up to scroll. If you'll notice the date time component, which if anyone uses it, if you open it inside of a scrollable div and then you scroll the div, it will go away. It'll actually hide. The reason it does this is because when you use absolute or fixed positioning, in this case, it doesn't really matter. When you use absolute or fixed positioning inside of a scrollable div, it does not transition with it correctly. Now, if it's inside the body, if you're inside of an entire body and the body's scrollable, it will scroll with it because it's actually on the page. But there's a difference between it's almost like 3D applications. 3D applications have different spaces. The camera space, the world space, the this space, the that space, and that's kind of how this works almost. So you've got the actual body location here and where it is in the scroll. But if you're inside of a scrollable div, it doesn't use it. It's using the body where the body position is to determine itself, not where the actual scrollable div position is. So it's easier if you just hook up to the scroll event, and when the scroll event fires, close your overlay panel and then just make the user open it again. That's why if anyone uses my date time component, they'll see that that's what it does. It actually just, as you scroll, if you're inside of a scrollable div, as you scroll, it will go away. It's a lot easier than trying to figure out how to actually make it translate with the scrollable div. Just little tricks of the trade. I'm sorry. Bob said overtime, and I said, well, let's go for it. But yeah, next one will probably be basics of HTML. Go through a lot of the HTML tags. Talk about why certain tags are important. What using those tags will get you instead of just using divs everywhere. Good. I'm glad it was helpful. Yeah, like I said, I swear I'll probably close this thing down and it will probably start working again. I'll bet you Storybook will start working. It'll look great. I'll post the pictures. I'll post the pictures out there so everyone can see what I'm talking about and try to put some explanation around it. I appreciate everyone who hung on and who listened to me ramble a bit about trying to get things started and try multiple times to make things work. It is what it is. It always seems to something always seems to go wrong. That's why I said you never know what's going to happen in a live stream. That's why I say it. So that's 100% true. You never know what's going to happen in a live stream. But I'll definitely post something here shortly once I actually get it back to working. But I thank everyone for attending. I thank all the comments, especially Bob for all his comments here, and for him staying up so late. I know it's late his time. He's what, man? It's probably almost 1 o'clock your time. So yeah.